Hello there fellow modelers and welcome to Genesis Models. We're going to be doing a rapid video build today of the F4U-1 Corsair. This is by Tamiya in 1/48 scale. We're going to be, there's a couple of notes, we're going to be doing a nice bit of scratch building, adding extra surface detail, dials, buttons, knobs, all that kind of good stuff. So let's get started with the Corsair. We're going to be just, as I say, start off with some scratch building, which we're going to use some 0.5mm plastic card with this. We're just going to cut this out. Tamiya scissors are actually good for just cutting out that. Got some Despair stuff as well. We're going to be using a angle cutter here. This is really good for scratch building in the sense that we can cut all sorts of shapes accurately, nice and parallel, nicely to size. Doing some bulkheads with those little pieces just there, so we're going to add that to the kind of lacking in detail a little bit. So with some tweezers and a bit of glue to get it to bite a little bit first, we're then going to try carefully and add that bulkhead and glue it down. Once they're down, just leave it to dry. I know it's protruding a lot, but that doesn't really matter. I'm also going to make a little bit of a box here, and again with this angle cutter we can make everything really nice and square, 90-degree angles, get the right sizes. I mean, I think this was like 5mm, and you could just make it perfectly 5mm all the way around, and we can attach this to our wheel well, and then with a little bit of Tamiya extra cement, quickly adjust that into position if needed with a sewing needle. Coming in with some copper wire, some basic stuff for scratch building. Going to use some nice cutters and get that nicely straight, right? And to do that, really, I mean, a nice two sort of metal hard objects. A ruler here is what I'm using. Roll that out and you get it really perfectly straight. I'm going to put this together with about 3 of them, so I want to glue it. We have this Despair super glue applicator here, which is rather cool, maybe a bit expensive for the job, but you know, I think it looks cool. And getting 3 of them together and gluing them, I like to wipe off one side, the side we're gonna see, right, so we don't see like super glue blobs. We do the opposite side as well, and then we just want to sort of glue that into position, and then maybe press it down and then glue the opposite side. And we got ourselves, I mean, I know it's not accurate, but something that makes things look a little bit more interesting in there. So we've got some wires or hoses or hydraulics or something. Now that our sort of bulkhead bits have dried, we can cut them off and sand them away, and hopefully you can agree, it's quite easy, but it just adds that bit of extra flavor. And a bit of rivets. I like to use a sewing needle because it's a bit hard to get in there, so a bit of a sewing needle, just kind of putting some rivets in there. The wash should take that nicely as well. And this here actually is an ejector pin mark that I've just added some rivets in there to make it look like it's some sort of something you can unscrew, something that's supposed to be there. So you could do that, saves you kind of like removing ejector pin marks if needed. Now we're going to do some rivet work. Now with this rivet work, we got tools like this. I think this is why RB Productions, I like to get that first tooth in a nice corner, and you look at it at an angle so you can get that first tooth in there, but then I like to rotate and get a bird's eye view, and you close one eye and then you just sort of make sure you're following that recessed panel line, and you should get a nice straight line of rivets, which does add to the flavor and the surface detail and makes everything look rather cool. So that's riveting, and as you can see with a bit of wash on there, what kind of results you can get. Now on to RB tools. We're going to be using a punch and die set here. This is so we can do a bit more scratch building, buttons, dials, knobs, that kind of stuff. It's nice and easy because you just put in whatever thickness of plastic card you want, and then you just hammer home the size. And as you can see, we can collect a load of different sizes. Now they are really tiny when we're trying to do buttons here. I like to use a sewing needle just to pick it up and place it down, and a bit of Tamiya extra thin cement, and then very quickly you can adjust that with the sewing needle again to get that button in the right position. We're also going to go off and do I just looked at some reference photos and it looked like something that you kind of turn, but like I'm raising it first with a smaller size circle and then putting the actual circle on top there, so it looks like something that you could turn, so we can make things a bit more three-dimensional as well. Now this spear does a nice handy holder here, a nice clamp, because we kind of need free hands to do these. I forget what they were called now, but there was some sort of knobs and dials that you could maneuver up and down, and we just needed that extra hand, and that's where the clamps come in place. And we could put like little, what I use for buttons, but I'm using for like a little knob on the end of the lever there, just to create that really cool bit of three-dimensional sort of everything going on in the cockpit. And you know, again, rivets are really cool and easy. With the sewing needle, we can really sort of spice things up that way as well when we put the wash on. Now we're going to do some sort of pipes, hoses, wire work, that kind of thing. And if we add a bit of masking tape either side, and then we get some Mr. Surfacer out, we can actually sort of paint on what is almost looks like what would clamp these wires and hoses down to the bulkhead. So it just adds that, again, bit more three-dimensional look to the cockpit area. And we can glue that in with some super glue, just making careful that we do that. Now we're going to move on to some seat belts. Now we are putting a pilot in this, so it's not like a full seat belt set, it's just giving that liveliness of like having the pilot's seat belts that are on him connect to the cockpit itself. So a bit of simple masking tape, and we just glue that down, position it right, and hopefully, as you could see, we can get that to nicely attach to our seat, which just adds that extra little detail. So with a bit of primer now down on our cockpit, we're going to come in with the colour I prefer, which is 095 Pale Green by Vallejo Model Air. I like to start off with a light misty coat first to just help the paint stick to the model, and then we move in with a normal light coat, which looks wet but it's not dripping or pooling up or anything like that. So there's our main coat. Now I'm going to be using real colour markers here. It's like a nice acrylic pens, starting off with flat black. I'm really sort of switching to these pens. I do find that they are so easy to paint in detailed areas on the cockpit from any of your colours. I know the paintbrushes look big, but they do have a nice enough tip, and I do find that when it comes to cockpits, you're normally painting raised areas, which makes it easy. So coming in with some aluminium here to do our pipes or hoses that's going on in the cockpit area just there. And as you can see, we can paint those small areas. Even coming in with some red, I'm going to paint a button here, just a nice red button, and you just kind of be careful. And what I like about it is the flow is consistent with the pens as well. You haven't got to keep stopping to sort out your brushes because they've dried up. Now we're going to apply a filter. A filter's something, it's not a wash. We don't want to be bringing out the surface detailed areas, raised areas. It's just an all-round change in hue of our base color that we've got on there. Now we've got a Despair panel line applicator here. Using some deep brown panel line wash by Ammo, we're just going to touch those raised areas, and hopefully, as you can see, it just flows nicely. This really sort of helps bring out the detail in there, brings it to the foreground, and it really sort of eliminates the amount of cleanup we have to do afterwards. Now coming in with the medium grey, this is going to be a good colour for our black areas to give them some weathering and a bit of a wash and bring out again the detail to the foreground a bit more. You might want to sort of clean up your dials as well, because we don't want them to be too dirty. We want to put, make them look nice and glassy and shiny. This is interesting by Despair again. They've got these reusable cotton wool buds. I'm just making them damp with some enamel thinners, and I'm just rubbing off any sort of mistakey areas where we've put down our wash, and just clean it up on the top surface and the lower surface. And then we're going to put a matte coat all over our cockpit, and once that's done, we're going to sort of glue our pilot in here and glue him into the seat, as well as a bit of super glue just smeared on the underside of our seat belts there, just to hold them into place. And hopefully, as you can agree, that does give us that little detail that is sometimes normally forgotten with putting pilots in, and I do like it. It's something you should kind of do because it does look so cool, because it's something you could notice if you didn't do it. On to bringing the fuselage halves together. There is a little bit of a gap issue here, but again, we've been buying a lot of dispear tools here. We've got this nice sort of drill grinder thing going on here, rotary drill, and we can just drill down any sort of raised areas to get that gap removed. I'm just lining things up now with the fuselage. So we're just now going to use Tamiya extra thin cement to glue the fuselage halves together. Now everything's lined up and we've made sure there's no steps, or and it's all going to glue together nicely. Now we have the wing section. Now this model is designed to be one that is in a folded position. You can have it in the normal position, but there's going to be some steps, and we want to make sure this is perfect as possible. So I'm just doing whatever we need to do, a bit of trimming here and there, test fit, making sure everything's going to be lined up as best as possible. Now I'm just gluing that little area there just so it just lightly holds it, but the glue line I'm leaving. I'm coming on the backside with some super glue, and this is all just so as we can make sure that everything's lined up properly, because it's going to be really noticeable if you've got steps and gaps, and it's supposed to kind of look like a recessed panel line. So we're making sure it's all good before we actually come in and finally put some Tamiya extra thin cement along that glue line, to remove as much problems as possible. And then we can I'm going to then put the lower part of the wing section on, peg it down and glue it down. Should be good after that. So onto some sanding. We have a 400 grit dispear sanding stick, sponge sanding stick by the way, and after every sort of sanding I'm sort of brushing away whatever sanding dust there is on there. I do need to actually cut these down. You can cut these sponge sanding sticks down to whatever size you want to get into certain areas you need to, and then we're going to go through the grits, right? So we've started at 400, going to 8, 1000, 1500, and that should get the surface looking like the rest of the surface around the model. Now just to make sure that we've got no mistakes, a bit of a black pen or spray paint. I find that these new acrylic pens are really good to just see what work that needs to be done, or if we have to do any at all. So after a bit of standing, you might notice, oh, we've got a bit of a gap showing there. Once we've completely removed it, you really can tell when you've got a gap going. So we're going to use the color gap filling CA filler, again another dispear tool that we're going mad with at the moment. Nice applicator that we have there, and we can just place that on the filler on top of the gap, and then you do have an accelerator if you want to sort of move things along, and we can apply that on top, and it should get everything nice and rock hard, and we haven't got to wait for things like shrinkage or anything like that. We can jump straight in and get sanding, going through all the grits like we did before. And we could do a final test if you wanted to and put another coat of acrylic black pen on top just to make sure we are all good, and we can forget about that for now. Also, there might be areas that have a bit of detail all around it, so a bit of masking tape either side just to make sure that everything is going to be sort of protected. We're only going to have to do a minimal amount of work when it comes to rescribing and all that kind of good stuff. So there we go, that is the end of part 1. Hopefully you're going to be looking forward to part 2 coming in 2 weeks, but as always, please do visit Genesis Models website. Please check out all our other videos. We've got loads of content over there, step-by-steps, inbox reviews, tutorials, absolutely everything, and a nice Discord channel for you guys to come together as a community. So as always, until next time, my name is Bobby Waldron, this is Genesis Models, and I hope you've enjoyed.